Ever wondered why some people just don't seem to cross your path? No matter how hard you search, do you ever get that feeling, like the universe is deliberately hiding someone from you? Back in November of 2024, Dr. Alan Shaw dropped a bombshell on the Huberman lab that sent chills down my spine. He revealed that attachment patterns formed in the first 24 months of life literally mold the physical structure of your brain, not metaphorically, physically. The neural circuits that determine who you can see, who you can love, who you can even recognize as a potential partner, are built before you even have conscious memories. And here's the part that no one tells you. These circuits might be completely blind to the kind of love you actually need. Carl Jung cracked this code over a century ago. He called it the readiness paradox. The soul can only recognize what it's prepared for. Everything else remains invisible, not because it doesn't exist, but because you haven't yet developed the eyes to see it. What I'm about to reveal in the next few minutes will completely transform how you understand relationships, timing, and what people mistakenly call destiny. Because destiny isn't some mystical force, it's neurobiological. And Jung knew this before brain scanners even existed. Let me ask you a question that might seem a little out there at first. Have you ever met someone and instantly felt like they were significant? That feeling of recognition that defies all logic. Jung called that an archetype projection. Dr. Huberman now knows exactly which brain circuits light up in that moment. But here's what neither of them explicitly tells you. That feeling of recognition only happens when your brain is ready for it. People can pass you by your entire life, and you simply won't see them. Not because they're not there, but because your recognition circuits haven't matured enough for that specific kind of connection. Hold on to that thought. It'll make a lot more sense when I unveil the protocol that connects Jung and Huberman at the end. Let's start with what Jung discovered, which modern psychology has only just recently validated, almost a century later. Jung observed thousands of patients throughout his career. He noticed a disturbing pattern. People didn't find the love of their life by chance. There was always an internal preparation that happened before, a kind of soul-level maturation he called individuation. And this process had very specific stages. First came the confrontation with the shadow self, those parts of yourself you reject, that you hide, that you pretend don't exist. As long as those parts remained unconscious, they sabotaged every relationship. You attracted exactly the kind of person who reflected your unhealed wounds, not because the universe was cruel, but because your brain could only recognize patterns it already knew. Then came the integration of the anima, or animus, the inner feminine in men and the inner masculine in women. Jung realized that as long as these internal energies were projected outward, you'd never see the real person in front of you. You'd only see a screen onto which you projected your own unintegrated parts. Relationships like that were intense, sure, but they were fundamentally illusory. And here's what shocked me when I connected Jung with the research from 2024. A study published in January of 2025 in Developmental Cognitive Neuroscience revealed something extraordinary. Puberty initiates neurobiological changes that amplify the brain's responsiveness to the environment. But this plasticity isn't infinite. There's a window where the brain is especially open to forming new social connection circuits. The researchers called this readiness to embrace uncertainty. And that's exactly what Jung was describing as individuation. When you do the inner work, you literally open new windows of neural plasticity. You create new recognition circuits. You become capable of seeing people who were previously invisible to you. But hold on, because the next part is even more disturbing. Dr. Alan Shaw explained on the Huberman lab that the first 24 months of life create what he calls attachment templates. These templates act like perceptual filters. Your brain literally filters reality based on these templates formed before you have any conscious memory. If you grew up with inconsistent caregivers, your anxious attachment template makes you hypervigilant for signs of abandonment. You see threat where it doesn't exist, and paradoxically, you're drawn to people who replicate that pattern of inconsistency. Not because you're a masochist, but because your brain only recognizes as familiar what matches the template. If you grew up with emotionally unavailable caregivers, Your avoidant attachment template makes you run from genuine intimacy. You feel suffocated by people who want closeness, and you're attracted to people who replicate that emotional distance. Again, not by conscious choice, but because your brain is wired for it. And here's the revelation that Jung made a century ago, and that we only now have neuroscientific validation for. These templates can be rewritten. But there's a prerequisite. You must first make conscious what was unconscious. Jung called this making the shadow self conscious. Huberman calls it reorganizing circuits through targeted neuroplasticity. It's the same thing. Different languages, same phenomenon. But wait. There's one more template that almost no one mentions. Disorganized attachment. This one is the most complex and the most painful. It happens when the caregiver was simultaneously a source of comfort and a source of fear. The child learns that love and danger are connected. And in adulthood, this person oscillates between desperately seeking connection and violently sabotaging any intimacy they achieve. They want love more than anything. But the moment they get it, they panic and destroy everything. Jung described this pattern in a poetic way that'll give you goosebumps. He said some souls carry wounds so deep that they turn gold into ashes, not out of malice, but out of pure terror of losing what they desire most. And the neurobiological mechanism behind this is fascinating. In people with disorganized attachment, the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex are in constant war. One wants connection, the other screams danger, and the person is trapped in this internal ping-pong match that sabotages any possibility of a stable relationship. The good news, and here's where the hope comes in, is that even disorganized attachment can be healed. Studies from 2024 and 2025 show that attachment-focused therapy, combined with nervous system regulation practices, can literally rewire these circuits. It's not fast. It can take years. But it is possible. And when it happens, a person finally becomes able to see and receive the love that the universe seemed to be hiding from them. Remember when I said at the beginning about the universe hiding certain people? Now you understand the mechanism. It's not the universe. It's your brain. Your recognition circuits are calibrated to see only what corresponds to your internal templates. People who would be perfect for you could be walking past you every day. But if they don't match your template, your brain literally doesn't register their presence as significant. This explains why so many people report finding the love of their life exactly when they stopped looking. It's not magic. It's neuroscience. When you stop looking obsessively, you decrease the activation of the stress system. Cortisol goes down. The prefrontal cortex regains executive function, and your perception filters relax. You start to see people who were previously invisible. But here's the problem that no one discusses. Stopping the search isn't enough if you haven't done the internal work. You might be completely relaxed and still blind to the love that's right in front of you. Because your attachment templates continue operating in the background, the relaxation just removes one layer of blockage. The deeper layers, the templates formed in childhood, need active work to be rewritten. And this is where Carl Jung becomes indispensable to complement Andrew Huberman. Jung developed a technique called active imagination. He guided his patients to consciously dialogue with the rejected parts of themselves, with the shadow self, with the anima, animus, with the autonomous complexes that operated without conscious supervision. This dialogue had an effect that Jung couldn't explain at the time, but that we now know to be targeted neuroplasticity in action. When you make an unconscious pattern conscious, you create an opportunity for the prefrontal cortex to get involved in the processing. And the prefrontal cortex has the ability to modulate and eventually rewrite the limbic circuits. Dr. Huberman talks about this constantly when discussing protocols for anxiety and emotional regulation, but he rarely connects it to the work of Jung. And that connection is absolutely crucial. Let me tell you about a study from 2025 that connected all of this in a way that left me speechless. Researchers discovered that people who practice some form of structured self-reflection, be it Jungian therapy, meditation, or deep journaling show measurable changes in the connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. This increased connectivity means that the conscious brain gains more control over the automatic reactions of the emotional brain. In practical terms, this means that your attachment templates lose power. You start responding to the present instead of reacting to the past. And when that happens, something magical occurs. People who were previously invisible to you start appearing in your field of perception, not because they changed, but because you changed. Your recognition circuits have been updated. You've developed new eyes. Carl Jung called this process synchronicity, apparently unconnected events that align in meaningful ways. He insisted that synchronicity wasn't coincidence. It was an ordering principle that operated beyond linear causality, and for decades, science dismissed it as mysticism. But recent studies on the brain's salience network are beginning to validate what Jung intuited. The salience network is responsible for determining what your brain considers important, what deserves attention, what is significant. And that network is highly plastic. It can be retrained. When you do deep inner work, you literally reprogram what your salience network considers worthy of attention. People and opportunities that previously went unnoticed start to stand out. Not because the universe changed, but because your perception changed. And here's where I need to be very honest with you. Why does academia keep Carl Jung and Andrew Huberman separate? Why do neuroscientists rarely cite Jung? Why do Jungians often ignore neuroscience? The answer is uncomfortable. Academic ego, territories of knowledge, research funding. If you admit that a Swiss psychologist from the early 20th century discovered through clinical observation what laboratories with millions of dollars are discovering now, it's humiliating for the scientific establishment. And if you admit that neuroscience can validate concepts that seemed mystical, it's uncomfortable for those who built an identity as a materialist scientist. But here's the truth that neither side wants to admit. Jung and Huberman are describing the same elephant, one through direct observation of human experience, the other through measuring brain activity. And the elephant is this: you don't find love when you look for it. You find love when you become capable of recognizing it. And becoming capable of recognizing it requires internal work that very few people are willing to do. Let me give you a concrete example of how this suppression of knowledge affects you directly. In April 2025, psychotherapist Lori Gottlieb appeared on the Huberman Lab to discuss how to find and be a good romantic partner. She said something that should have caused a revolution in relationship psychology. She explained that childhood wounds and strengths directly influence who you choose as a partner. It's not coincidence. It's neurobiological programming. And that's exactly what Jung said in 1921 about autonomous complexes. But Gottlieb didn't cite Jung once during the interview. Why? Because citing Jung is still taboo in certain academic circles, even when you're saying exactly the same thing he said a century ago. And here's what frustrates me deeply. Millions of people watched that interview and came away thinking they were hearing modern discoveries, when in fact, they were hearing Jung translated into contemporary language. If those people knew that the original work already exists, has been tested for decades, already has developed protocols, they would have access to much deeper tools for transformation, but that connection is deliberately erased, and you pay the price. Now comes the practical part. The hybrid protocol that I developed combining Jung and Huberman. Pay attention because this could completely change your relationship trajectory. Phase 1, shadow mapping. For 2 weeks, you're going to do the following exercise every night before bed. You're going to identify a person who irritated you during the day. It could be a small irritation. It could be intense anger. It doesn't matter the magnitude. What matters is that this person activated an emotional reaction in you. Now, instead of justifying your irritation, you're going to ask, what is this person reflecting back to me that I don't want to see? This question will seem absurd at first. You'll resist it. You'll want to say that the person really is irritating and that it has nothing to do with you. But persist, because what irritates you most in others is almost always a quality that you've repressed in yourself. Phase 2. Nervous system regulation. While doing the Jungian work of exploring your shadow self, you also need to regulate your nervous system. This is fundamental. If your nervous system is chronically activated in fight or flight mode, your prefrontal cortex can't function adequately. Your attachment templates become even more rigid. Dr. Huberman recommends several protocols for this. The simplest is the physiological sigh. 2 quick inhalations through the nose, followed by a long exhalation through the mouth. Doing this 3 times in a row activates the parasympathetic nervous system and reduces cortisol in minutes. Do this every time you feel anxiety about relationships. Phase 3. Dialogue with the anima or animus. This is the most Jungian part, and also the most powerful. Once a week, you're going to do an active imagination session. Sit in a quiet place, close your eyes, and internally invite the image of your ideal partner. Don't force a specific image. Let it emerge spontaneously. It could be someone you know. It could be a completely unknown figure. It may not even have a defined face. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you establish an internal dialogue with this image. Ask, what do you represent that I haven't yet integrated into myself? Ask, what do you need from me to manifest in my life? Ask, what is preventing me from recognizing you in the external world? The answers that arise will surprise you. Often, they will reveal exactly the blockages that are preventing you from seeing the love that is already available to you. Phase 4. Gradual exposure to novelty. Here, neuroscience comes into play more directly. To rewrite your attachment templates, you need to expose your brain to experiences that challenge the old patterns. This means deliberately putting yourself in social situations that are slightly uncomfortable. Not traumatizing, slightly uncomfortable. Talking to strangers, going to events alone, maintaining eye contact for a few seconds longer than is comfortable. Each of these experiences creates an opportunity for your brain to recalibrate its circuits of social connection. Phase 5. Integration and patience. This is the step that most people skip. After doing the previous 4 phases for at least 90 days, you need a period of integration. This means continuing the practice, but without the expectation of a result, without obsessively looking for signs that it's working, without constantly checking if someone new has appeared. This period of integration is crucial because it's when the neural changes consolidate. Dr. Huberman constantly talks about how real learning happens during sleep and during periods of rest, not during active practice. The same applies to the reprogramming of attachment templates. Now you might be thinking, this sounds like a lot of work. And you're right. It is a lot of work. But let me ask you something. How much work have you already invested in relationships that didn't work out? How much emotional energy have you already spent chasing people who could never give you what you needed? How many nights have you already spent wondering why love seems to work for everyone but you? The work I'm proposing is different because it attacks the root of the problem. It's not about finding the right person. It's about becoming the person, capable of recognizing and receiving the right person. And that transformation changes everything, not just your relationships, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with work, your relationship with life. You've just received knowledge that literally took a century to compile. Carl Jung spent his entire life developing these ideas. Dr. Huberman and dozens of neuroscientists have spent millions on research to scientifically validate what I'm giving you for free. If this video has helped you understand something about yourself that was previously confusing, consider clicking on the golden heart below. The super thanks isn't just financial support. It's you saying that this type of content, that unites deep psychology with modern neuroscience, deserves to exist, and you're signaling that you want more revelations like this. Each contribution finances the next research, the next video, the next connection between Jung and Huberman that no one else is making. Let me tell you a story that illustrates everything I've said so far. A 38-year-old woman came to see me after a series of failed relationships. She described a very specific pattern. She'd meet interesting men, feel an intense initial connection, and then after a few months, everything would fall apart. She was convinced that she had bad luck in love, that the universe was against her, that maybe she just wasn't made for relationships. When we started exploring her history, we discovered something revealing. Her father was emotionally distant, physically present, but emotionally absent. She grew up trying to gain the attention and affection of a man who simply couldn't give it, and without realizing it, she replicated that pattern her whole life. The men she found interesting were inevitably emotionally unavailable men, men she had to conquer, men who kept her in a state of constant anxiety, because it was never clear if they really loved her. Interestingly, she had encountered over the years several men who were emotionally available, men who demonstrated genuine interest, men who didn't play games, and she discarded them almost immediately. They were boring. There was no chemistry. It lacked that intensity that she associated with love. Do you perceive what was happening? Her attachment template was calibrated to recognize as love only that which replicated the dynamic with her father. The anxiety of not knowing if she was loved, the constant need to prove her worth, the emotional roller coaster. Men who offered something different simply didn't register on her radar as potential partners. After months of work, using a combination of Jungian techniques and nervous system regulation protocols, something started to change. She began to notice men who were previously invisible to her. Not because they changed, because she changed. Her recognition circuits were updated. She developed new eyes. And one day, she met someone. A man who embodied everything her former self would have labeled boring. Present, consistent, emotionally available. No games, no drama. And for the first time in her life, instead of feeling like something was missing, she felt peace. She felt like she had finally found home. That is the power of the work I'm describing. It's not about finding the perfect person out there. It's about becoming capable of recognizing and receiving the person who may already be waiting for you to notice their presence. But let me tell you about a second case that illustrates the other side of this coin. A 45-year-old man who had never been able to maintain a relationship for more than 6 months. He was professionally successful. He'd been in conventional therapy for years. He read all the self-help books. He followed all the personal optimization protocols. But when it came to love, something always went wrong. He attracted amazing women, women who truly loved him, women willing to build a life with him. And he always found a reason to end things. He was too critical. He constantly compared. He felt like something was missing, that there must be someone better out there. When we did the shadow self-work, we discovered something that shocked him. He was afraid of being abandoned, but instead of manifesting that fear as anxiety, he manifested it as preemptive rejection. He ended things before he could be ended. He sabotaged before he could be sabotaged. It was a brilliant unconscious strategy from a self-protection standpoint, but completely destructive from the point of view of building real intimacy. And even more revealing was what we discovered about his animus. The idealized feminine figure that he projected onto all women was impossible to match, because it wasn't a real person. It was an archetypal image that he had never integrated. As long as that image remained projected outward, no real woman could satisfy him. They would all always be compared to an unattainable ideal. His work was different from the work of the woman in the first case. He needed to confront his abandoner shadow self, to recognize that the abandoner he feared in others lived within himself. And he needed to withdraw the animus projection, integrate that feminine energy internally, to finally be able to see real women instead of projection screens. It took almost 2 years of consistent work, but in the end, he succeeded. And when he did, something extraordinary happened. He reconnected with a woman he had met years before, who at the time he had dismissed for not feeling enough chemistry, except now. With updated recognition circuits, he could finally see her, and what he saw surprised him. She was exactly what he needed. She always had been. He just couldn't see it. Now let me reveal the deepest part of all this. Carl Jung believed that the universe operates through something he called the unus mundus, a unified reality where mind and matter are not separate. He believed that when you change internally, the external world responds, not magically, but through an ordering principle that connects the internal to the external. For decades, this was dismissed as mysticism. But consider the recent studies on neuroplasticity and perception. Your brain actively constructs the reality you experience. It filters, organizes, and interprets sensory data based on internal templates. When those templates change, the reality you experience changes. Not because the external world has changed, but because you have changed how you process it. This isn't mystical. It's neuroscience. But the practical effect is identical to what Carl Jung described as synchronicity. You change internally, and suddenly people and opportunities start to appear that were previously invisible. The universe seems to respond to your internal states, and in a certain sense, it does, because the universe you experience is always filtered through your perceptual circuits. So when people say that the universe hides love from you until you are ready, they are correct. Except it's not the universe doing it. It's your own brain, your attachment templates, your perception filters, your still unmatured recognition circuits. And the good news is that this can change. You can do the work. You can rewrite the templates. You can develop new eyes. And when you do, you will discover that the love that seemed impossible may have always been right in front of you, patiently waiting for you to become capable of seeing it. Now I want to hear from you. And this is going to be revealing. Do you identify more with the person who attracts impossible relationships, or with the person who simply can't see opportunities for love that are available? Tell us in the comments, because that answer will reveal a lot about what internal work you need to prioritize. And if you're brave enough to share, you might find in the comments other people on the same journey. People who understand. People who are also doing the work of developing new eyes to see the love that the universe, or rather, that the brain, was hiding from them.